Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and of course, successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And people, we are very excited to showcase this next guest here on our network, so do me a favor. Sit back, strap in, and get ready for a wonderful ride. And on the line with us today, we have James J. Maiwurm. Now, some of you may remember Jim when he was on our network previously. Well, we had such a great time with him. The reviews were so favorable that it was a no-brainer, okay? We had to invite Jim back here on the network with us. We're discussing his amazing book, Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. Head on over there today, get lost in this magnificent book, because I promise you, you're not going to be able to put it down. Now, I'm going to go into that in further detail in just a moment, but before we go any further, I want to make sure that I point out that Jim was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, you already know, I'm talking about Stellar Literary Press and Media. So listen to me. If you are a writer out there watching right now, you've gone through the gauntlet of writing your book and getting it really up to par to get put out for the public, okay? But now you find yourself in a precarious position because, well, now you need help moving that book you just finished creating. Well, I'm going to give you some fantastic advice. People, you got to contact Stellar Literary. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to stellarliterary.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, as I mentioned to you before, Jim is the truest embodiment of a person of distinction. His book is something that you need to add to your shelf for so many reasons. Now, it's a political thriller, so that right there, stop the presses. This needs to be on your Hollywood television screen, okay? This needs to be something that we watch on the big screen, because already it's going to resonate with millions of people. But not only is it entertaining, it also is steeped in some fantastic notions that are really going to make you formulate conversations. Well, hopefully formulate conversations, okay? That was the intent behind the book. And this is something that you really want to take a look at in terms of our political sphere, where we currently stand, not only here in this country, but globally, and where we could potentially be heading, depending on certain decisions that are made or not made. And I'm telling you, there is so much more to go into. We're only going to scratch the surface here today, but by the time we've concluded, you're going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies. And listen, Jim is the expert. It's his book. He's written it, and he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So like I said to you before, sit back and strap in. Jim, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us. How you doing?
Doing well, Benji, and thank you. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Listen, the pleasure is all ours. We're truly looking forward to this, Jim. I think what you're doing, as I mentioned, is something special. Man, it's something that's needed because your book has stark contrasts to today's society politically, and really the horrors of what could come in the world that we have yet to see. So I think what you're doing here for the entertainment side of things is fantastic, but also there's something in the foundation and what it's steeped in that could really help paint the picture for certain people. And I'm loving what you're doing. Jim, before we jump into the book, I think it's important to start off by learning a little bit more about yourself. So please tell us more about your background.
Well, my background is rather unexciting. I come from a very small town in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, but it was a high quality, high value place to grow up, and I feel privileged to come from that background. And then I went to college also in the middle of Ohio at the College of Worcester, and I married my high school sweetheart after the end of our days at college, and then I went to law school, Michigan, and have been in Washington since the mid-'80s. And so that's the long and short. But what I've done through life has sort of escalated through time. I started in a little town in Ohio, which had as I said before, a high values content. And I moved to a small town where the undergraduate college was. And I went to a higher level of activity at Michigan Law School. And then I practiced in Cleveland for 11 years. And now I've been in Washington. And trying to figure out what to do, whether I'm retired or what, but I'll figure that out, not on this call.
There you have it. You know, Jim, it's interesting because you started off by saying that your background is not that interesting. Well, listen, I got some news for you, man. First and foremost, to hear that you married your high school sweetheart is something that doesn't happen that often, right? I know some of my close friends that were together in high school and grew and developed together. I think that is something magical, that is something beautiful, that is something so pure about it that we can spend an entire interview talking just about that. And Jim, I would say, if I may be brave enough, that should be your next book, right? Talking to us about that amazing love story, man, because I'm sure it is something that is captivating and a lot of people would love to hear about and to read about. So, just to keep that in mind.
It's been a real joy, and I've been lucky as the smartest move I ever made.
There you go.
I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that just because she's eventually going to see this. I mean it.
No, listen, I believe it. I firmly believe that behind every great man is an even greater woman. And for those of us that are blessed enough to partner with such a magnificent individual, we truly understand how amazing things are and really what a gift it is, because my wife is the same. I mean, she completes me, to use a cliche, in every way and truly makes me a better person. So Jim, I'm right there with you, man. It's a wonderful thing. And listen, we could spend all the interview time talking about that relationship. But of course, the anchor is all about your fantastic book, Inheritance of Crisis and Dysfunction. So Jim, without further ado, tell us a little bit more about the words on those pages.
Okay, let me start by, if you don't mind, giving a little bit of background about where the book came from.
Yeah, please.
And I really started thinking hard about it after the Trump presidential election, which is the one that he won. And that's the one where he beat Hillary Clinton for the job. And I was concerned about that at the time. However, I was impressed with Mr. Trump in the sense that as I watched that election, I understood more than I had before that this gentleman is smart. He's cagey in bad ways, I guess. Mm-hmm. He is intelligent in terms of being a strategic thinker. He understands how the legal system, for better or worse. And so this gentleman was more of a handful, I think, than anybody expected. And we saw that in the way he handles himself in debates. And we saw it he handled himself in the White House. And so I think one needed to take a step back and wonder what are we dealing with here. This is not your average presidential candidate. It's not going to be your average president. And so you begin to think about, what am I worried about it? And in Mr. Trump's case, you're worried about some of his policies, some of his practices, some of his relationship issues with the truth, some of his relationships issues with other people, the extent to which he really knocked heads internally with people in the government who were very important to him, people in the State Department, other intelligence agencies. Mm-hmm. And so as the year went on, and I also spent some time at home because I had a slight illness bout, I began to think maybe there's something more that I need to do the next time around. We're dealing with a bigger problem than we might have thought. Dealing with bigger challenges, better. And so what we did was I started thinking about maybe there's a way to address things that I'm concerned about, both domestically and internationally, in the form of a book as opposed to making telephone calls or walking the streets. statements, which are very, very important parts of political traditions, but which also have limitations in terms of scope and effect. And so I took it as there being a need for a book that really had both a mission and a message. And the mission was to avoid having a re-election of Mr. Trump. And the message was, this is pretty darn important. And that was true 3 years ago when I started thinking about the book. It's more true now. Right. So this is not a time to relax. If you think this is your grandfather's or your father's or your mother's presidential campaign coming up, you're wrong. We're dealing with something that has much more urgency and much more opportunity for things going badly over the long term than the average presidential election. So we need everybody to be digging in and working and having dialogue and making sure that we understand each other.
You know, Jim, thank you very much for all of that. And hearing you talk brings me back to, although it seems like an eternity ago, to just a few years when we were going through the pandemic and Trump was in the presidential office and the whole stealing of the election or the attempt to, and really how many people sided with him and still do. And it brings up an alarming recognition of where we currently stand here in the States. As the next presidential election fast approaches, we see the leading Republican candidate is Donald Trump. There's no getting around that. So, Jim, in addition to what you were seeing about him, what are you seeing, or what were you seeing about the country on a whole, in a grander scale, and where we are going? Because I understand that this book really can paint a picture of our future and some of the alarming things that we hope we don't see. Talk to us about what you were seeing from a community standpoint, from a country standpoint, and where we are heading.
Let me start out with even a little bit broader than that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Important to the thinking behind my message here, or the book's message. You know, I've had the opportunity, for better or worse, and in my case better, of being involved in lots of things in various places around the world. Mm-hmm. And I have done work in Europe, in Asia, South America, as well as the United States. And I have noted that in all places in the world, really, I can't think of a real single exception, positive exception, for some places where there are high capacity terrorist zones. But really, what everybody in the world is interested in is two or three things. They want a fair rate. And they want to be paid a fair dollar, fair day's work. They want to be able to have good home life. They want to have decent surroundings in terms of how they live and where they live. Mm-hmm. They want their kids to be have an opportunity to get a quality education. And they basically want the world to be fair. And people are not looking for handouts here. But they're looking for the opportunity just to be treated squarely. That's a phenomenon that really exists all over. I can remember as an example of the way things change when governments change. I can remember I used to go to Hong Kong once in a while. Law firm I was Hong Kong, great people, smart people, wonderful. But all of a sudden, when things changed due to the treaty with Great Britain, things changed like think. I'll give you a little example. You know, in the old days, a term like that, you know, one used to go to Hong Kong and get an English-speaking cab post. That I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese. But as soon as the Chinese took over Hong Kong, it seems like naturally what happened was that the cab drivers at the Hong Kong airport either stopped knowing English, decided they were going to say that. That's just a little example of how on a day-to-day basis, changes in government can impose changes in discussions and thoughts and reactions to things. And you see that phenomenon all over the world in different, sometimes very significant ways, and sometimes in less significant ways. So what I think we need to do is be saying to ourselves, we all have one heck of a lot more in common than we do not in common. And what we need to be doing is heading toward the middle of the playing field. And when I used to talk about a political football field, but we need to be heading toward the middle of that playing field, not the four corners. And we need to be taking an opportunity to do as we must to encourage people to head for the middle of that zone. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean everybody has to think the same, but we want people to be thinking about the same issues and trying to worry about what's right for their community, for their family, for their country, and for the world, because we are entering, as you suggested, we're entering a time when COVID could be the least of our problems, and that's saying a mouthful.
Yeah, how about that, huh? Oh my goodness, what a scary time. Scary time. And listen, I'm an optimist, and for me to say that it's a scary time is really saying a lot. People, I'm telling you, this is something that you need to add to your shelves. This is a fantastic book for so many reasons. Amazon, Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Inheritance of Crisis and Dysfunction is the book you have to pick up, and James J. Maiwurm is the author you need to thank for bringing it to your table. Head on over there today, pick up your copies. Jim, for the next question here, really a curiosity for myself, but what would you say was a highlight for you in this entire writing process? Between creating the book, putting the words on the page, maybe getting it published, what was a highlight for you? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating?
Well, I would say the thing that probably is best fits that category is the way that people who I talked with about the book and about the theory were in acceptance of it in ways that were different than I thought might happen. If you've got time, I'll give you a short example.
Yeah, please.
So I grew up in Ohio, as I said earlier, and although it was a small-ish area, it was rural. My great wife talked about I grew up on a farm. I grew up in a metropolis of about 2,500 people, and so those are people who, by and large, voted for Trump in the last election. Mm-hmm. That Trump participated in. And the thing that you need to understand about that is that they didn't really vote against somebody who Trump they wanted to do. I believe, correctly interpreted, is they wanted to not be in a situation having rights taken away from them. Give a small microcosm type of answer to that. Mm-hmm. Let me talk a little bit about the abortion. Early last year, Ohio put themselves in a situation where they were about to wipe out any right to abortion. I'm not going to get into the abortion issue, but heaven knows there's 1,000 different angles to that. Right. And I appreciate a lot of people who have different views, and we all need to do that.
Yeah, of course.
But what happened in Ohio was everybody expected then at the general election in November, this past November, to vote favorably on a constitutional amendment in Ohio that would really eliminate the flexibility not to change the law in Ohio with respect to our rights to abortion. And so the electorate flipped on it over its head. They did a heck of a and it flipped it in ways that people did not expect. And as I tried to rationalize that, why did the guy who I grew up with and who told me that the reason he didn't like to have to take a COVID shot was because the government was telling him not to do what to do, and he was having to decide whether he wanted to do it or not. He felt pressure from the government taking away a right for him to decide whether he wanted or didn't want to take a COVID shot. Well, the same thing happened with this abortion. People are actually in favor of abortion, but voted for that amendment, which makes it harder and harder to get abortion. I think probably because, not that they took a real spin and are different people, it's because they were concerned about having rights taken away. Even if they were not going to exercise those rights, they wanted not to be giving things up. You know, if you look what's going on right now in the country and facing the litigation that's going on with the Trump organization and various elements of the state and federal government, the same thing comes around. Because what's going on right now is that there is a high-level dispute that was actually argued before the D.C. Circuit, this having to do with to what extent does the government have the right to impose sanctions under things like the Voting Rights Act, or is that something that individuals cannot push on, but only the Justice Department can enforce? Well, the voting rights is a very important thing, and if you go back into the 60s, the genesis of voting rights legislation was very important in terms of making progress along the lines of race relations, and heaven knows we've got a lot of progress yet to make. But the fact that we were talking about in this litigation, taking away rights with respect to the First Amendment, arguably by putting a gag order on former President Trump, there was a fight going on there between what's right and wrong under the First Amendment for a person who was being charged with a serious offense, and what's right and wrong for the country as a whole. And that's a close call and a very difficult thing to answer. But that's going to be of intense interest to those many people who believe that one of the most important pieces of legislation enacted in the last century is the Voting Rights Act, because it was sort of a cleanup act after the Reconstruction days, the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. So that's a very important issue. It comes up in an odd context, but it's important because people, ordinary people, are worried about what happens when we start having courts take away rights, and we take away Donald Trump's right to complain about people, how he's being treated by the system. And Donald Trump is entitled to as much protection as anybody else. But we're also concerned about what happens to the people who are threatened by others who are being challenged and being accused of crimes. And we don't want, basically people who are in charge of being in a position to take steps that are contrary to the happiness, the comfort, and the safety of individuals who are involved in the criminal rights system and enforcing it. So the way I look at it is that, part of what we need to be doing in this country is balancing what's right and wrong, and what's right, what a right to do or not to do is, and then also what the balancing act is between enforcing the law versus not enforcing the law versus enforcing with some discretion. And so I think it takes you back to the middle, to where I think all of us need to be, and say, when you're in the middle, you only have to move 10 yards to make a difference as opposed to 50 yards. And we want to be in a country in a world where 10-yard goals, 10-yard gains make a difference. Because over a lifetime, 10 yards here, 10 yards there makes a heck of a big difference. When you're looking at what the graduation is in terms of graduation from where we are now to what we want to be, and we need to be worried about that. And it's not going to affect my life. It'll affect yours a little bit, but it's really going to go back to the kids. And James Carville worked with the Clinton organization back in the 90s. Used to say it's the economy stupid. And that was probably true during the Clinton days, and you see that reflected in what the Clinton administration did. But I would say in 2023 that it's the kids stupid. That's what kids, not the kids in the United States, kids all over the world.
Right.
Because these are the people who are going to have to carry us through, carry their kids through, and make this world a place that's safe and healthy to live in, and it's a place where everybody has a fair shake. They go back to the beginning. People are interested in this, not being advantaged, or worried about not being disadvantaged. They don't want rights taken away. They're willing to live with fair systems, and as long as they get a fair break. Lord knows we have lots of places in the world where injustice exists. Some of it's economic injustice, some of it's access injustice, and we know that in this world we're also in a situation. There is a communications explosion, but it's an explosion of stuff that is of questionable value in terms of accuracy or status over the long haul. So lots of things that we need to be worried about. But the key thing is let's gather around the middle of the playing field. Talk to one another, not ignore them. When you're understanding why they will agree or not agree, do or not do, provide or not provide, in various other sectors. Because I think go back again, in the totality of the world, people aren't asking for more than that. They're entitled to that. We all need to be working on making this world a fairer place, a safer place, climate safety place, and a place that where your kids, and my kids' will be not only be alive, but well and happy, and well both in terms of physical wellness and also mental wellness, which is a problem.
You know, Jim, as we close out here, man, because listen, I know myself, I could sit here, I could talk to you for hours. Okay, I am engulfed in what you are saying. Your book, I find to be a breath of fresh air for so many reasons, and something that is truly remarkable. But I got to remind myself, Benji, this is not about you. So let me hone it in here. And as we start to close out, I look at your book and I see the next great Hollywood film. Right? I mean, it's a political thriller that needs to be on the Hollywood screen. As great as it is as a literary creation, I can see it influencing millions more if it were to be on a television or a film screen. That being said, my background is in filmmaking. I live in my imagination, Jim. So I love my next question here for so many reasons. But if you could enter the world of the book that you've written, Jim, which page would you choose to land on in it, and why?
That's a very interesting question. I would probably go to pages about 2/3 of the way through, where people are beginning to talk with one another. And the way you put that was exactly what one of my goals is. You want to create dialogue.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to create complete agreement. But dialogue is a good start as opposed to some of the other things. And so when I did the latter portion, trying to figure out how we get together people with different skills, different strengths, different existences, different wealth levels. We really want people to be comfortable with one another, and I would like to see this being something that creates discussion, whether it's in a church, a club, a bar. Some people will say it's the craziest thing they've ever read. Others will say, may not like it. We are in a place in the world where what's coming against us in terms of climate, it's coming against us in terms of ill effects of war, what's coming against us in terms of misinformation is out there and higher. And wait until you see the effect of AI on misinformation. It's going to be bad information on steroids. So all that stuff is stuff we need to sort out and understand what we really want to worry about, what we we want to affect, what we want to support. But we need to be doing it together, and that we're never going to reach 100%.
Right.
And we will, we must get closer, because that's what's going to take. Be comfortable in the world that we're living in, and comfortable with the futures others are coming at.
Jim, this has been a true delight, man. Something that you said in your previous answer was you created the book to initiate dialogue. And it made me think that I don't know where or how it happened, but it seems that the political realm that we live in, and it's not just political, but I will, of course, focus on politics since that's what your book is surrounded by. Somewhere along the lines, it became a thing where if you are on the right, then you have to believe in totality everything that the right believes. And vice versa. If you're on the left, then you have to believe in totality, unanimously, in what the left believes and what the left preaches. And I don't understand where that came about and why that is a thing. Because people, if we stop and we think about it, there is no one in our life that we completely agree with 100% of the time. Okay? Believe me, people, ask my wife. She'll tell you. My closest confidant, the mother of my children, the closest confidant that I have, and even we have disagreements. I don't believe everything that she believes, and she doesn't believe everything that I believe. But yet we are still able to have a successful partnership through disagreements. But somehow, in the political spectrum, that can't be the case, right? You're either on the right or you're on the left. I don't understand why that is, or why it's even believed to be correct. Jim, your book, as I mentioned, man, and I'm going to continue to say it because I truly believe it. It is remarkable for so many reasons in terms of why how it's going to make people think and the conversations that are going to be generated because of it. People, I'm telling you, this is something, if this hasn't moved you, you need to pinch yourself because clearly you're asleep, okay? Amazon, Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. You have to pick up your copies today. This is something that needs to be on your shelf, and I'm going to take it a step further. It's an even better gift for you to get for someone else to add to theirs. So you know where to go. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, get lost in it, and check back in frequently because although there's not another book on the horizon just yet, I'm hoping that through an overwhelming show of support in purchasing of this book, we'll be able to show Jim how much we need another one. And he'll be back to the drawing board and creating that one. That's just the hope. Fingers crossed here. Listen, this has been an absolute pleasure, Jim, as I said before. It's such a delight. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you.